Hey, welcome into Carpooling with Ben. Today, folks, I am introducing you to Boston MedFlight. They're an incredible organization, a nonprofit organization that provides services really that I hope you never have to use, but it's nice to know that they're there when and if you do need them. So I'm going to introduce you today to their Chief Operations Officer of Transport, and then next week I'm going to introduce you to two of their flight crew who are really just, they're literal angels that fly and deliver amazing care, not only in emergency situations, but really just that critical transport need. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Rick Kennan. He is the Chief of Operations of Boston MedFlight.
When somebody says, okay, what do you do for work? What do you say?
I work for the premier helicopter air ambulance company in the country. Boston MedFlight is, first of all, proud to be a New England native, but Boston MedFlight was created as a non-profit, strictly air ambulance company to serve the needs of Eastern Massachusetts, Rhode Island. Over the years, we've moved forward from just helicopters to now we have a fleet of ground vehicles as well as fixed wing, an airplane for longer distance and for inclement weather. And what makes Boston MedFlight stand out is, first of all, we are a nonprofit, which is very unique in the air ambulance world. When it was created back in 1984, a lot of hospitals were creating for-profit air ambulance companies, but the consortium of hospitals that created Boston MedFlight decided to set it aside as a 501c3 nonprofit. And that status really tempers the culture of the company. I came to the company 7 years ago specifically because of the culture of being a nonprofit and not being always after the buck. And so we're able to do things that other companies can't do because we're not always focused on where's the next dollar coming from.
So as you may imagine, that keeps the focus on the critical care and the services Boston MedFlight provides.
We're quite fortunate in that we have a consortium of hospitals behind us. We do fundraising as well, so we're not fully dependent on insurance or payment from patients, and so we can transport and treat patients without concern for their ability to pay. And each year we give away $5 million worth of unreimbursed medical care because we do have that nonprofit mindset.
Yeah, you heard that correctly. Approximately $5 million worth of services that they give away unreimbursed.
About 90% of the industry is for-profit, and the insurance availability is very important. We never ask a question, who's paying for this? We just launch. We go to take care of the patient. And our motto has always been the right patient, the right vehicle, at the right time, going to the right hospital. We're agnostic whether the patient is going to Rhode Island Hospital or going to Mass General. We take the patient to the closest appropriate facility.
So I was curious how Rick got into this line of work.
Prior to coming to work for Boston MedFlight, I had a 30-year career in the Coast Guard as a search and rescue pilot. When I decided to retire, I was looking for a place to work where I could have the same kind of rescuer mentality, the same ethos, and Boston MedFlight was the place. I'd never actually lived up here. I'd never been stationed up here before. I had lived in Boston, and when I heard about Boston MedFlight and the position that was coming open, I really jumped on it. So my background in aviation, as well as my background in basically medical evacuation, really paid off, and I took this position, and it's been great ever since. The company has really grown in the 7 years I've been with it. When I started, we had about 65, 70 employees. We now have 160 employees. We've gone from 2 bases to now we have 4 bases for helicopters. Our helicopter fleet has expanded from, we had 3 helicopters when I started, we have 5 helicopters now. So the company has really grown, and it's grown sensibly to serve the patients that need us. So many patients when I started, we weren't able to get to them because we either didn't have an aircraft available or a ground vehicle available, or it wasn't in the right place. But now that we have bases like here in Mansfield where we can service areas that before we were out of reach for, it makes the patient transport that much more efficient. And so the company has really grown, but they've grown very smartly.
I think we can all agree that driving to the various hospitals in southern New England presents its own set of challenges. Now imagine doing it with a helicopter.
So Boston, as most people know, is busy not just on the highways, but in the airspace also. It's a very complex and very crowded airspace here. So working helicopters in this area, it can be very challenging. And so we need to make sure that we have pilots who have that level of experience that they can work in crowded airspace. We hire pilots that have a tremendous experience compared to some others. If you're working in the flatlands of Texas, there aren't a lot of other aircraft around you. You're not talking to air traffic control. But here, everywhere we go, we have to talk to air traffic control to make sure that the airspace is clear for us. So there's one challenge. Probably the biggest challenge, being in New England, is the weather. Boston MedFlight is unique in that our pilots and our aircraft are certified to fly both in instrument conditions as well as visual conditions. Again, a rarity in the air ambulance world because most fly only on visual clear days like today. But we have the ability and the proficiency to fly on the cloudy, bad weather days because we fly the latest technology equipment, and our pilots are skilled and trained and proficient in flying in those conditions. On the ground side, there are a lot of patients that don't need the speed of a helicopter, but they still need the level of care that we provide in critical care medicine. So it makes more sense, it's more efficient, it allows us to keep the helicopters for those patients who need the speed of the helicopter. It allows us to do it more efficiently to use the ground vehicles. So our ground transport business has expanded tremendously because you have a patient who's in an intensive care unit at Sturdy Hospital and needs to go down to Rhode Island Hospital. You could do them by helicopter, but they don't need the speed of the helicopter. So we put them in one of these trucks with the same level of clinical care, and they get there efficiently and safely, and they get the care that they need along the way.
You know, in emergency response situations, Boston MedFlight could be working with a variety of fire departments or first responders, and they could be landing in unconventional spots like a ball field or a highway. So that's a challenge in and of itself.
Something that's unique here that I had never seen before is the things that get helicopters in trouble are flying into areas that are unfamiliar. So if you get a call to pick up a patient at a ball field that you've never been to before, that's high risk because you don't know where the towers are and all the obstacles are around. But the EMS system is so mature in this area that we have designated landing zones in every town that have been inspected, that we know are safe, and so we know where we're going. So if we're going to Warren, Rhode Island, we have a book. The pilot has a database that says, oh, there's 5 landing zones there that have been inspected. Which one is closest to the patient? So that's just one example of how the team of first responders works with Boston MedFlight and the other air ambulance providers to make sure that it's safe for us to pick up their patients and to get them where they need to go. We do routine training. I mentioned we're going down to work with Providence Fire Department here on the 1st of June to do landing zone training with them. They want to know how to safely approach a helicopter, how to take care of the patient when they're being loaded onto the helicopter. And we get calls like that all the time. We do at least a couple of those a week where we go out to work with first responders on how to safely handle operations around a helicopter. So it's a great team effort here in Rhode Island and eastern Massachusetts.
As I wrapped up the interview, I asked Rick, what was the one thing you want viewers to take away from this and to really understand about Boston MedFlight?
I guess I really want to stress that Boston MedFlight being a nonprofit is a little known benefit that people in this area have. Until it's the worst day of your life, you're not going to probably even know Boston MedFlight exists. But ever after that, you're going to know what Boston MedFlight is. We are really dependent on fundraising to keep these helicopters flying. The people that come to work for Boston MedFlight don't come here because they're going to make a lot of money. They are nurses and paramedics who make a lot more money working in a hospital or working for a fire department. They come here because they know the benefit of what they're going to provide for their communities, because they're going to see people on the worst day of their lives and they're going to make it better. And they're not going to just take care of the patient, they're going to take care of the family as well. And all that depends on our ability to, as I say, keep the rotors turning. And that in large part goes to our fundraising requirements. So just want to stress how uniquely positioned Boston MedFlight is in this area and what a benefit we provide to the area.
Man, I really like that phrasing that Rick just said there, helping to keep the rotors turning. You can help do that by going to bostonmedflight.org. You'll find ways that you can help donate, even legacy gifts or ways that you can get involved. And also by sharing this episode, and be sure to come back for part 2, where we'll introduce you to 2 of the flight crew, how they got into it, and even some of the life outside of the jumpsuit. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe.